I've always been the responsible one in my family. I'm not rich, but I'm stable. That's why my Aunt Claire and Uncle Mark always ask me to house sit when they go on their big international trips. I'm writing this to explain why I will never be doing that again. This was last fall, maybe early November. They were in Japan for 2 weeks. Their house is a lot. It's one of those big, modern houses on a few acres of land, way out in the country. The nearest neighbor is almost a mile away. It's nice during the day, but at night, it gets so dark you can't see your hand in front of your face. I was staying in the main guest room. On one night, I was in the living room watching a movie. I was curled up on this huge leather sofa, just starting to feel cozy. I had a glass of wine. It was perfectly quiet outside. No storm, no wind, just silence. I remember thinking it was almost too quiet. I was about to doze off when the power suddenly went out. The TV, the lights, the air conditioning. Everything just clicked off at once, plunging the entire house into total oppressive darkness. I groaned, annoyed. I figured it was just a country thing and a transformer blowing or something. I didn't feel like dealing with it. I figured I'd just find a flashlight and go to bed. The kitchen has a big window that looks out onto the side yard, right where the main breaker box is. I held my phone up to the window, squinting through the glass, and nearly died from my heart stopping right there. The metal door of the breaker box was wide open, and there was a man standing in front of it. He was just looking at the box. As soon as my light hit him, he didn't run. He just slowly turned his head and stared right at me. I stumbled back, dropping my phone on the tile. What the hell had I just seen? I felt my heart starting to race. I could barely breathe. But I didn't have much time to process it, because a few seconds later I started hearing another sound. The front door. The heavy thud of the deadbolt being thrown. They were in the house. My mind just couldn't process both things at once. The man outside and the sounds inside. I felt this cold panic start to rise up in my chest. I was alone in this huge dark house, and they were inside. On top of everything, the one outside knew exactly where I was. I couldn't think clearly. Everything was happening so fast, but I had to act. I quickly grabbed my phone from the floor. I checked the screen, ready to call 911, but the little icon in the corner was gone. No service. The house is a dead zone without the Wi-Fi. I knew I couldn't just sit and wait. I tried to calm myself, thinking I couldn't let them just roam around. I was literally stuck. I decided I'd try to sneak out the back, the sliding glass door in the living room. It was the furthest point from the front hall, keeping my footsteps as quiet as possible. I made my way back into the living room. I can still feel that cold, absolute fear. I saw a second figure, standing on the patio, just waiting. They had both exits covered. I watched them for a few seconds, literally petrified. I backed away from the glass into the darkest corner of the room, behind that big sofa. I didn't move. I just listened as they murmured to each other in low voices. And then I heard a voice, clear and calm from the hallway, that made my blood turn to ice. "Megan, we know you're in here. Your aunt said you'd be." I can't describe the terror I was feeling. How the hell did they know my name? How did they know my aunt? I backed into the corner, trying to keep my breathing steady, but inside I was losing my mind entirely. My mind was racing. They knew I was there, and they were looking for me. Hiding was useless. I scanned the room, desperate for another way out. Any way out. The windows. It was the only option. I had no other choice. I grabbed one of those heavy, decorative glass knots from the coffee table, ran to the dining room window and smashed the glass. Glass shattered everywhere, but I didn't care. I scrambled through the frame, catching my hands and my leg on the broken shards. The pain was sharp, but the fear was sharper. I just ran. I ran into the trees at the edge of the property, not looking back. I ran through the dark, trying not to trip over roots. Once I was a safe distance from the house, on the main road my phone buzzed. I finally had a signal. I called the police. I remember my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. By the time the police searched the house, whoever had been in there was long gone. So much stuff had been stolen. The police found the back door wide open. The power outage had been intentional. My aunt and uncle were horrified and flew home early. I basically had to beg them not to blame me, insisting there was nothing I could have done. They eventually calmed down, but I'm still pretty shaken. I still have no idea who those people were, or why they knew my name. My aunt swore she'd never mentioned me to anyone. I hate thinking about what might have happened had they found me in that corner. I work the night shift at a 24-hour self-storage facility. It's in a half-dead part of town, mostly just empty lots and a truck stop about a mile down the road. The building itself is massive, 2 floors of long, identical hallways lined with bright orange roll-up doors. The work is simple. I sit in a small office by the front gate, watch security monitors, and occasionally help a late-night customer who forgot their gate code. It's quiet most of the time, but I like being alone. Most nights, I just do homework for my online classes and the hours slide by. It was a Monday night and dead calm. I was in the office, trying to get through a chapter on basic economics. The power in the office flickered and then just died. The whole building went completely black and silent. I was pissed. I was the only person on duty. The responsibility for getting the power back on was mine. I knew the procedure, but I'd never actually had to do it. I stepped out of the office into the main hallway to begin the process. The main breaker was in a utility closet on the other side of the building on the ground floor. My flashlight was the only light in the whole place. It was honestly creepy as hell. The silence was heavy. Without the hum of the fluorescent lights, every little sound seemed amplified. My footsteps on the concrete sounded way too loud, which was a weird feeling. As I was walking down one of the long corridors, I heard a loud grating rumble echoing from somewhere up ahead. It was the unmistakable sound of a heavy, metal roll-up door being opened. It startled me, but I brushed it off. I figured a customer had gotten in just before the power cut and was now stuck. Still, I decided to check it out. When I rounded the corner, I froze. A faint beam of light was moving around inside one of the units up ahead. It looked like a phone light. The second my flashlight beam swept the corridor, the other light just vanished. But I was sure I'd seen it. No one should have been in there. I felt my skin start to crawl. Why the hell would someone be in a unit in the pitch black? I debated calling out, but ultimately decided against it. When I reached the unit where I'd seen the light, the roll-up door was open about 3 feet from the floor. The aisle was empty. I pointed my beam inside. It was just rows of dusty boxes and old furniture covered in tarps. I started freaking out, knowing I wasn't crazy. I knew what I saw. My first instinct was to call the cops. But what would I say? That I saw a light? I mean, it could have been a reflection off the metal doors, I guess. As I stood there, a strange smell hit me. Cigarette smoke. Not old smoke, but fresh, like someone had just put one out. The smell was coming from inside the unit. I followed the smell with my flashlight, and that's when I noticed something odd. My beam glinted off something on the floor, right by the locking latch. It was a pair of bolt cutters, the heavy-duty kind. In that moment I wanted to run, but I couldn't just yet. If someone was breaking into units, it was on me. That was literally my job. I couldn't just walk away. I had to see what that smell was. I stepped into the unit, keeping my beam pointed at the floor. That's when I heard it. Hushed voices. It sounded like an argument, but the words were too low to make out. I immediately cut my light and stood perfectly still, just listening. As I turned the corner of a stack of boxes, I raised my flashlight to confront whoever was there. But the unit was empty. Honest to God, no one was in front of me. The whispering had stopped. It was pure insanity. They had to have been right there. The whole situation had me rattled. I decided I wasn't getting paid enough for this. I was just going to make a beeline for the circuit room, get the power on, and then call my boss. I made it there and started fumbling with the breakers in the dark. As I was doing that, I heard something scrape on the concrete outside the utility room. I swung my flashlight around and spotted the edge of a boot disappearing around the corner. This was serious now. Whoever was in here was waiting for me. I yelled out that I'd called the police, and which was a total bluff. I needed to get out of there fast. My nerves were shot. As I was heading for the main hallway, a loud bang echoed from the far end of the building, followed by the unmistakable sound of one of the heavy exit doors slamming shut. I felt a surge of adrenaline and started running toward the noise. I turned the corner and there he was. Standing in the middle of the aisle and blocking my way back to the office was a tall figure. He was just standing there. He looked at me for a split second, and then he waved. A slow, casual wave, like he knew me. I didn't think. I just turned and ran. All the confidence I had just mustered was gone. I could hear his footsteps behind me. I weaved through the aisles, praying that I'd be able to navigate this place better than he could. I just kept running, my lungs burning. The footsteps finally faded. I paused, catching my breath, and realized he wasn't chasing me anymore. Eventually, I made my way toward the back exit and stepped outside into the parking lot. The cops figured the power cut was to let them move their stuff in the dark. My boss, of course, was furious that I left the property. He actually tried to write me up for abandoning my post. I quit the next morning. I still can't get that guy's wave out of my head. He wasn't scared. He was toying with me. I'm just glad he didn't decide to follow me to the truck stop. This was about 4 years ago, back when I was living in my first apartment by myself. It was an old brick building, the kind with creaky floors and a temperamental heating system. My unit was on the first floor, right above the shared laundry room in the basement. It was a Sunday night, probably just after 10 p.m. I'd put my last load of clothes in the dryer and was just killing the last 20 minutes, scrolling on my phone in my living room before heading down to get them. I was halfway through a video when my screen became the only source of light in the room. The whole building went dark. I let out a heavy sigh. It wasn't the first time it had happened. The building was old, and the wiring was probably ancient. I figured a breaker had just tripped somewhere. I sat in the dark for a minute, waiting for the emergency lights in the hallway to kick on, but they never did. Total darkness. My first thought was about my laundry. I didn't want my clothes sitting in the dryer all night getting wrinkled. I grabbed my keys, but left my phone on the coffee table since it was nearly dead anyway. I figured I'd just run down, grab my stuff, and be back in 2 minutes. I opened my apartment door and stepped into the pitch-black hallway, using the wall to guide myself to the stairwell. The basement was even darker, and the air was damp and chilly. The only sound was the faint ticking of the dryers as they cooled down. I made my way over to my machine, opened the door, and started pulling my warm clothes into my basket. That's when I heard it. A loud, heavy thud from directly above me. It was right where my living room was. It wasn't the sound of a neighbor dropping something. It was a dead, solid impact. I froze, my hands buried in a pile of warm shirts. I stood there listening. For a full minute, there was nothing but the sound of my own breathing. I told myself it was just the building settling, or maybe my upstairs neighbor was moving furniture. But then I heard another sound that made the blood in my veins run cold, the distinct, quiet scrape of my own coffee table being dragged across the hardwood floor. Someone was in my apartment. The realization didn't come with a panic attack, but with a strange, terrifying stillness as it all clicked into place. I was trapped in the basement with the only way out leading right past my front door, and my phone was sitting on the very coffee table that had just been moved. I crouched down behind a row of washing machines, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear their footsteps now, 2 sets at least. They weren't rushing. They moved with a slow, deliberate weight that made the old floorboards above me groan. I could follow their path from the living room toward the kitchen, then back toward the bedroom. A muffled thud, then agonizing creak of a specific floorboard, right outside my bedroom door that I knew so well. They were going through everything, every private corner of my life, and I was just a few feet beneath them, helpless. The only thing separating us was a layer of wood and plaster. Finally, after maybe 15 minutes, I heard them move back toward the front of the apartment. I heard the jangle of my own keys being picked up from the little bowl I kept by the door. Then I heard my front door open, and a moment later, the heavy slam of the main building door echoed through the stairwell. I waited, not moving a muscle for another 5 minutes. The silence was almost as scary as the noise had been. I slowly crept up the stairs, my laundry basket completely forgotten. My apartment door was slightly ajar, the wood around the lock splintered and broken. I didn't go in. I ran to my next-door neighbor's apartment and pounded on the door until a light turned on. And he let me in. The police came, and the story was exactly what you'd expect. They had cut the main power in the service alley, behind the building, knowing it would kill the lights and any security cameras. They'd forced my door and taken my laptop, my small TV, and the cash I had in a desk drawer. But the real horror didn't hit me until after the police had left and the power was back on. I was standing in my violated living room when I walked into the bedroom to see the full extent of the mess. On my pillow, placed neatly in the center, was the framed photo I kept on my nightstand. It was a picture of my younger sister. The glass of the frame was cracked, and someone had used a pen to violently scratch out her eyes. I moved out a month later. It wasn't the stolen electronics or the broken door that I couldn't get over. It was the photograph. The thought that they took the time to do that, to leave a message. It wasn't just a robbery. It felt like a promise. I work the graveyard shift at a 24-hour convenience store off Route 9. It's not a bad job, honestly. Most nights are pretty dead, and I can get through my online coursework between the occasional customer. The pay isn't great, but it covers rent, and my manager doesn't care what I do as long as the store's clean and the register's balanced at the end of my shift. This particular night started off normal. I clocked in at 11 p.m., and by midnight, the usual late-night crowd had already cycled through. A few truckers, someone buying cigarettes, the regular who gets energy drinks. Around 1 a.m., a guy came in that I hadn't seen before. Middle-aged, maybe late 40s, wearing a jacket that seemed too heavy for the season. He didn't really look at me when he walked in, just went straight to the back where we keep the drinks. He stayed back there for a while, like longer than normal. I could see him through the security mirror we have mounted in the corner, and he was just standing there looking at the coolers. He finally grabbed a bottle of water and came up to pay. When I rang him up, he asked what time we closed. I told him we were open 24 hours. He nodded, paid in cash, and left without saying anything else. I went back to studying, and the next 2 hours were quiet. I think I had maybe 3 customers total. At some point around 3:15 a.m., I noticed the streetlights outside starting to flicker. They'd go dim, then bright again, then dim. I'd seen that happen before during summer when the grid gets overloaded. But it was October, so it seemed kind of strange. I didn't think much of it though. Maybe 20 minutes later, the lights inside the store started doing the same thing, flickering on and off, and I could hear the coolers in the back making a weird humming sound, like they were straining. Then everything went dark. Everything. The only light came from the emergency exit sign above the door and the glow from the gas station pumps outside, which were still running on some kind of backup power. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The store looked completely different in the dark. All those familiar aisles just turned into these long shadows. I walked over to the window and looked outside. The streetlights were out. The buildings across the road were dark. It looked like the whole area had lost power. I checked my phone for any alerts about an outage, but there was nothing. My signal was fine, just no information about what was going on. I figured I should probably call my manager and let him know. But before I could, I saw headlights pull into the parking lot. A car parked right in front of the store and someone got out. When they walked up to the door, I could see from the light of my phone that it was the same guy from earlier, the one who'd asked what time we closed. He pulled on the door, and I'd forgotten that it was still unlocked. Store policy was to keep it unlocked no matter what, even during an outage. He stepped inside, and I could barely make out his face in the darkness. "Power's out," I said, trying to sound normal. "I can't ring anything up right now." He didn't respond right away. He just stood there near the entrance, and I couldn't really tell if he was looking at me or not. "That's fine," he finally said. "I'm just waiting for it to come back on." That struck me as weird. Like, why would you come back to a store during a blackout and just wait around? I told him I didn't know how long it would be out, but he said he wasn't in a hurry. He walked over to the side of the store near the chip aisle and just stood there. I stayed behind the counter with my phone, using the light to keep an eye on where he was. We stayed like that for a few minutes. It was uncomfortable. The store was completely silent except for the sound of his breathing and his shoes occasionally shifting on the floor. I thought about asking him to leave, but technically the store was still open, and he hadn't done anything wrong. I just had this feeling that something was off about the whole situation. I tried calling my manager, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message explaining the power was out, and there was a customer acting strange, but I knew he wouldn't check it until morning. I pulled up the non-emergency police line on my phone, not to call yet, but just to have it ready in case I needed it. "You work here alone every night?" His voice came from the darkness, and it made me jump a little. "Sometimes." I lied. I pointed my phone light in his direction, and he was closer now. He'd moved from the chip aisle to the freezer section in the middle of the store, and I hadn't even heard him. He was just standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking right at me. "The backroom light didn't come on when you opened the door earlier," he said. "And I've been watching this place for 3 nights now. You're always alone." I didn't know what to say. My hand was already shaking as I held my phone. I pulled it back toward me and started dialing 911, but he must have seen the light move because he immediately started walking toward the counter. I pressed call and brought the phone up to my ear, and he stopped about 10 feet from the counter. The operator answered, and I told them where I was and that someone was threatening me. I was talking fast, trying to get the information out. The man didn't move. He just stood there listening to me talk to the dispatcher. She told me officers were being sent and to stay on the line. She asked if he had a weapon, and I said I didn't know. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said loud enough for the operator to hear. "I just want what's in the register." The operator heard him and told me to cooperate and give him whatever he wanted. But here's the thing. I couldn't open the register. It was electronic and without power. It was locked shut. I told him that, and I told the operator that. His expression changed. I couldn't see it clearly in the dark, but I could tell from his body language that he was frustrated. He looked around the store and then back at me. "You have a key for it," he said. "I don't. It's electric. There's no manual override." He took another step closer, and I backed up until I hit the cigarette display behind me. The operator was saying something about the police being 4 minutes away, but all I could focus on was him reaching into his jacket. I thought he was going for a weapon, but instead he pulled out a flashlight and shined it right in my face, blinding me. "Where's the safe?" We did have a safe in the back office where we dropped large bills, but I didn't have the combination. Only the manager did. I told him that, and I don't think he believed me because he told me to take him to the back. The operator was telling me not to let him take me to a second location, but I didn't really have a choice. He came around the counter and I could smell cigarette smoke on his jacket as he got close. I led him to the back office with my phone still on speaker. When we got to the office, and I pointed to the safe under the desk. He crouched down and looked at it, pulling on the handle. It was locked. Open it. I can't. I don't have the combination. Only the manager does. He stood up and got close to me, shining the flashlight in my face again. I could hear him breathing heavy, frustrated. Then, from somewhere outside, I heard a siren. It was faint, but it was getting louder. His head snapped toward the sound. He looked back at me one more time, then pushed past me and ran toward the front of the store. I heard the door chime as he left, and then an engine starting. By the time I got back to the front, his car was already pulling out of the lot. The police showed up maybe 30 seconds later. They searched the area, but he was gone. I gave them a description of the car and the guy, and they found security footage from a gas station 2 miles down that caught his license plate from earlier in the night. They arrested him 4 days later, trying to do the same thing at a pharmacy in the next county over. I don't work that shift anymore. I switched to mornings.